I'm here today with Mark of Jag Panzer to talk about the upcoming new record, the Hallowed, out June 23rd on Atomic Fire Records. How are you doing today?
Good. Doing lots of press, and that's a good thing, getting the word about the album out there. So thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for taking the time. The album's release is around the corner. You can count the days, the hours, the minutes, if you will. And let me start off by talking a little bit. I want to dive a little bit deep into the concept of this record. So, what inspired this story? What inspired this concept?
Well, we'd done a concept album years ago called Thane of the Throne. It was about Macbeth, and we had a lot of fun doing it because we approached the songwriting a little differently. We try to write it like we're doing a score to the story. So we thought, we haven't done a concept album in a while. Let's go ahead and do another one. Except this time we wrote an original story. It's kind of a classic adventure story, and it let us take the songwriting in a little different direction. It's a lot of fun doing this record, and it was also a ton of work.
I was going to ask you, is it a lot more difficult to approach an album when you know there's a concept that drives the story versus when you're just creating a regular record, for a lack of a better term?
Yeah, it's a lot different because I have to throw away a lot of riffs because they don't fit the part of the story. What I do is I was reading the part of the story, and in my mind I was imagining I was watching a movie and thinking about what type of what was the soundtrack like, is it fast or slow, or what kind of emotion are they trying to get out of it? So yeah, it means I got to throw away a lot more music because a lot of stuff just didn't fit.
Do you approach the album in the way it's put together from a structural perspective? Like, do you work on the opening song and then the next step in the storyline? How do you start to put all these pieces together when you're creating this concept album?
Oh, that's a good question. I work on whatever part of the story was fleshed out the most, because our singer Harry was really putting all the details in the story. So he was working on different parts at different sections. He was really working on specifically, he started with the animal song, because in the story, it's a group of people who have trained animals, and then they're in this frozen post-apocalyptic world. And there's a few songs about specific animals. So he was fleshing those out first. So that's the first things that I worked on. And yeah, for every song, I probably threw away 4 different ideas for that song because it just didn't fit the theme.
Is that the most challenging aspect of creating a concept record when it comes to the original vision that you had, and then putting that vision into play, finding the right sound for the right moment, for the right ebbs and flows?
Yeah, that is the most challenging, because with a normal heavy metal record, I'm like, that's a cool riff that can go on the album. But this time that's a cool riff. It doesn't fit anywhere. Into the trash it goes.
One thing I really enjoyed about going through this album from top to bottom was those little add-on, I'm going to call it atmospheric pieces, either be the sounds of rain or even the narrator, the pieces of the narrator. To me, that really helped me understand where I was within the story, helped me guide me all the way through. Is that something that when you're creating the songs from the get-go becomes part of your overall idea, or is there something that gets added at later stages once most of the tracks are already put together?
Yeah, that was something we talked about in the beginning. We had a band meeting, and a couple things we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure it set the mood of the story, but we didn't want them too long, because we had several of us in the band were complaining, I like this other concept album, but it had 20 minutes of interludes and talking. So we really wanted to pare it down to something that just it gave you the atmosphere, but it also got right to the point.
Mm-hmm. I thought you guys found the perfect balance, to be honest. You don't
want thank you.
Much of it, because at the end of the day, you still want to listen to the songs. That's what the bottom line is. So I honestly enjoyed the little nuances. I call them more like nuances that you guys introduced it, but it definitely helped me stay connected with the story. Now, listening to this record, I found this to be a very guitar-centric album. Is that a result of the story that you guys created, or is just that a result of the DNA of the band itself?
A little bit of both, but I would say mostly a result of the story, because it's kind of a brutal environment in the story. It's this crazy frozen post-apocalypse and monsters, and it's just brutal survival. So what's more brutal than an electric guitar? And we didn't tone down any of the noises. So I recorded my rhythm guitar just so loud. I had to go to all my neighbors and say, hey, this is going to be really, really loud. And if the guitar squealed or made noise, I just left all of it in there. I mean, I really wanted the raw sound of a really loud electric guitar.
I was saying that when this record to me has two main pillars, that being the vocals and the overall guitar sound. Considering that you took that loud approach, does that make the overall experience a little bit more organic from a guitar standpoint, almost like a live recording, if you will?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, because typically when I'd record, I'd have, sort of a mid-level guitar to keep everything under control. Yeah, we threw all that all out the window and just made it just loud and just screaming. And yeah, so it sounds much more organic. The drums definitely add to the organic sound. We're not gating any mics, so all the mics are on all the time, and it's picking up every sound. We left everything, as organic as we've ever done on a record.
Does that offer an overall experience of a little bit more of an old school record? Because when I pressed play for the first time and I went through the record, the production behind it, the overall sound experience felt a little bit like old school style, not overly polished, very naked, if you will. And it took me a little bit of time to get used to it. But once I got used to it and I got into the story, I felt like it really matched the harshness of the story itself. So the two, while at the beginning might not feel, accommodating, once you get into the story and you get into the record, everything kind of fell in place. Was that the overall vision?
Yeah, exactly. We wanted an old school, definitely an old school sound, because there's a lot of the modern mixers. I mean, I like a lot of them, and they're very loud and present in the ear. But to me, after I hear them about 10 times, I just get this ear fatigue, because it's just so, bass drums are mixed to be heard on a cell phone on many people's albums, and it's just, I don't know. We just wanted to do something different. I can listen to like classic Iron Maiden like all day and not get any ear fatigue. But I put on some other stuff, and it's just like after 2 listens, it's like, man, my ears need a break. And classic Priest, Maiden all day, no problem. So we wanted to try to bring some of that back, and it's been a bit controversial. Probably 75% of people seem to get what we're doing and like it, but I've had about 25% that really don't understand this production at all. This just is so weird sounding to me.
Like I said, for me at first glance, it took me by surprise. I honestly wasn't expecting it, but the more I listened to the record and the more I got into the story, the better the production felt in terms of blending in with what you guys were trying to do. So I think it's a matter of time. It's not necessarily, most concept records take a little bit of time for you to listen to them and really get into it. So it's not one of those albums that you press play and you're going to get everything out of it immediately. I don't think that was the point anyways, but that's not what you're going to get. So it comes down to the mindset of the listener, I feel, going into the record. At least that's my perspective. At least that's
and that's and we had actually, that's something we had talked about. Since it's a concept album, we're hoping people will listen to it multiple times, and then multiple times you'll start getting accustomed to the mix, because it is like I said, it's very different from most other mixes. Lots of other bands I talk to mix for cell phone, mix so you can hear it. And I understand why they do it. This is absolutely not mixed for your phone. This is mixed for your big stereo system.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're saying that, because I felt that way. But because I really like, there was enough in the record that I really enjoyed, and I really like the story, and I really like all those elements that you guys added to create a little bit more life in that story. That's what kept me coming back to the record. So the more I went back to the record, the less the production became an issue. And one of the things that made me come back to the record quite a bit was the guitar solos. Man, this album has outstanding guitar solos. So how was that? Because you have a story to tell. You have the choices of riffs for each song depending on where you are in the story. So what was your mindset when it came to the solos?
Well, that's interesting. We had just hired our touring guitar player. We'd asked him if he wanted to be in the band, and he said yeah. So this was his first stab at it. Yeah, he initially thought he was just doing solos, and I said, no, I want you to do the solos, but I also want you to try and just play along, play some melodies in and around the vocals, and we called it icing on the cake. Put the icing on the cake, and yeah, he did a wonderful job with it. I mean, we were really loved it. It was cool, and as far as his lead sound and everything, it was what we were looking for. He recorded it really loud tube amp. I know a lot of bands use plugins and everything, and and that's cool. Do whatever you want, but for this record, we wanted old school tube amps, all very loud, with just on the edge of just screaming.
I think you guys definitely achieved it. Now, I said earlier that the guitar sound and the vocals were the two pillars, at least for me, of this record. How would you describe Harry's vocal performance on this album?
Oh yeah, he approached it like live. I mean, he was just going for it. Man, we had so much fun doing vocals. We just he stayed I have a spare bedroom at the studio and a kitchen and everything. So he was living at the studio for several weeks. We were taking it at a reasonable pace and going out and grabbing a few beers and things like that. It was it was cool. He was treating it like a live show, which is what we were looking for.
His voice is phenomenal on this album. I love the range. I love the slight changes, because I was expecting his vocal performance to be more of a one-size-fits-all from the first track all the way to the last, but it's not the case. Some songs he goes in a little bit darker, it gives it a little bit of a darker vibe. Some tracks is completely over the top. So much life and energy in his vocal performance. Having a vocalist like that, does that allow you to create a better concept album, because you have somebody who can be multiple characters and define multiple moments within the story?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he was telling me before he started vocals that he had these ideas of how he wanted to approach the vocals based on the part of the story. And yeah, some of it, he said he's going, full on metal voice, a lot of screaming, and a couple of the other songs he's taking it down sort of in like the Dio range and keeping it there. And yeah, he wanted to do a lot vocally to fit the mood of each song, and I think he did a great job on it.
I think some tracks had a little bit of a early Queensryche feel to it. Even some King Diamond. There was some King Diamond in some of the tracks. His voice was outstanding throughout this entire album. I honestly, one of the highlights of the record. Now, for me, his vocal performance, the overall guitar sound, those solos are the highlights. But do you have specific songs that maybe are a little bit of a highlight for you that you feel a little bit more close connected to?
Yeah, I feel connected really to the song Dark Descent, because I'm a huge Rush fan, but the thing I always liked about Rush is when they'd play a song like Spirit of Radio or Limelight that was on the radio, and I'd have people tell me, I like that simple Rush song. And I'm thinking, that is not simple at all. They're just sort of hiding the complexity. So I always wanted to do that with a metal song. So that song, Dark Descent, it sounds like a basic metal track. I mean, I've had some interviews say, yeah, it's a cool basic metal track, kind of up-tempo. Man, we're doing some wacky things in there. I'm adding eighth notes and dropping eighth notes to make you think that the tempo is changing from the verse to the chorus, and it is not changing. But that dropping the notes, if you try tapping your foot to it, your foot's going to tell you, they just slowed down. No, we didn't slow down. So we're doing a little bit, some tricky things in that song, which I'm very proud of. I always like big epic songs. I grew up with Black Sabbath, Sign of the Southern Cross, and Heaven and Hell. So I'm kind of partial to the last song on the album, which is 10 minutes of weird, creepy vocals and a couple different solos and orchestration middle. And there's a lot going on in the story. So a lot going on in that song. So those two are probably my standout favorites.
Now, this album comes at a time where, you guys have 4 decades. You've been around for 4 decades. It's been a long time, and releasing such a cool concept album at this time. When you look back at these 4 decades, what has allowed you guys to have that longevity and to be at a position where you now can release a record like this, a very cool and interesting concept album?
We just like doing this. I mean, we love each other's company. We still all listen to metal like we started when we were like 11 years old, and we're just into it. I mean, all of us go to metal shows, listen to it, and Yeah, nobody's in this band saying, you know, we got to do this because I need to make a car payment next month, you know, and whatever. You know, if other bands do that, that's cool. But, you know, us, we're just in it because we really, really enjoy doing this. I mean, we got a tour coming up and I circled that on my calendar right away. And I'm just, you know, looking forward to that all of the time.
That was actually going to be my last question for you. So now with the album coming out on June 23rd on Atomic Fire Records, what are the plans for you guys to hit the road and promote this album? You said you have a tour. Is there anything you can share?
Yeah, we're in end of July. We've got 3 festivals in Europe. We got Headbangers Open Air, which is a great old school festival. We've got Wacken, you know, the giant granddaddy of metal festivals with the massive crowds. We have Alcatraz, which is also a pretty big, cool metal festival. And then we got a bunch of headlining club shows in between. And then we're coming back to the States and we're playing Blades of Steel in Wisconsin with Riot and Flotsam and Jetsam. And so that's going to be a really cool gig too. We have something going on in January. Everybody in the band has different jobs and I do not have anything to do with the touring, but they told me to have my passport ready in January. And I said, are we going back to Europe? They said, no, we're going somewhere new. So I don't know where it's going to be exciting though, somewhere new that requires my passport.
Well, exciting times for you guys. New record, shows in Europe. I honestly hope you guys get maybe in the new year a little bit of a tour across North America, maybe even come up to Canada. I'm in Toronto. I'd love to see you guys play some shows here as well. So
oh yeah,
I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you guys will do that on as support for this record. Mark, thank you very much for taking the time today. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed this record. It's such a cool story. I almost want to see a movie made out of it because it's
yeah,
really,
me too.
it's really, I don't know, it's really engaging. It has such nice ebbs and flows, and you really become connected with the characters. And like I said, the guitar performance and vocal performance on this album are outstanding. So great record all around.
Oh, thank you.
Once again, thank you for your time.
Hey, tell your son hello. I'm a big fan of your YouTube channel, so I like watching both of you on them. So
I will. I'll let him know. It was actually when I was listening to the record for the first time, he was in the car with me. I was driving him somewhere. We were driving for about an hour and a half, and I was like, oh, this is a great time to put the record on because there will be no interruptions and we can listen to the album from start to finish. So I think on that trip, going and coming back, I think we listened to the album 4 times in a row. Well, 2 times going, 2 times coming back. And he was actually asking me like, oh, is this a new album you're going to review? And I'm like, yeah, it's really cool. Like I said, it took me a little bit of time to get into it, but once I got into it, I really appreciated it. And it was a really fun record with some really hooky and catchy songs, which never hurts. It never hurts. So I'll definitely tell him hi. And congratulations on the album. And once again, thank you for taking the time today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was cool.
Take care, man. All the best.
Okay, you too. Bye.